What is going on, everybody? This is Arrowhead Action. I am Justin Dupengeiser. Today we have a jam-packed show, and we are presented by the Kansas City Sports Company. So, this is the first show. I want to start out by letting you know kind of who I am, what my background is, and we'll kind of go from there. I'm a diehard Chiefs fan, have been my whole life, and kind of the best part about that is I live near Buffalo, New York. So I am up in enemy territory, but I am no bandwagon fan. I have been a Chiefs fan for as long as I can remember. I've gone through the Damon Huard, Brody Croyle days, Tyler Thigpen days. So I'm as loyal as they come, and I wouldn't have it any other way, especially with the success that we've had lately. I love football. I have been coaching football for 19 years, both at the high school and collegiate level. And you can find me on Twitter at JDIZ1617. I'm always tweeting out different stuff. Whether it be Chiefs, whether it be NFL news, whether it be breaking down different football stuff, whether it be sports, betting, gambling, DFS, fantasy, do a little bit of it all. So, and that's kind of what the show is going to encompass. That's why it's called Arrowhead Action. You're going to see some betting stuff. You're going to see some fantasy stuff. Might dabble into the other sports. You know, we're coming up into a kind of sports dead zone right now. So we're going to have to talk about something. Obviously, there's always stuff to talk about with the NFL, but we also got maybe a little bit of golf, which I'd love to talk about. PGA Championship is coming about this weekend, and I'm actually going to get to go to it on Saturday because it's up in my neck of the woods. So super excited about that. But enough of all that stuff. Let's talk about these Kansas City Chiefs. So I figured what better way to start off the Arrowhead Action podcast than kind of talking about the state of the Kansas City Chiefs roster. And let's start on the offensive side of the ball. Okay. Next week, next show, we'll talk about the defensive side of the ball. But let's be honest, everyone's here for the offense. I'm an offensive coach. I'm an offensive coordinator. That's what puts the seats in the butts. And you know what? We got the best person in the world leading the charge for us, and that's Patrick Mahomes. So we'll start right there with quarterbacks. There's not much to say about Patrick. It is what it is. He's the best player to ever live. I don't even think it's kind of a debate at this point. I know some people will, but I think he's the best quarterback to ever play the game, even if he retired right now. Maybe that's hot takey. I don't think it is. But they do have an interesting situation going on with the second and third quarterbacks. They signed Blaine Gabbert this offseason, who is a long-time NFL vet, Missouri guy, so coming home to Kansas City. And then they still had Shane Buechele on the roster, who the Chiefs obviously like quite a bit. So to the point where even last year, they protected him multiple times from other teams, actually trying to poach him off the roster. I know the Cardinals tried to do it. They had to elevate him and keep him on the active game day roster eventually because they had to stop. They ran out of protections to use. So I don't think it's a situation, again, that the Chiefs are going to be able to afford to keep three quarterbacks on the roster. So what do they do with the second and third? Andy Reid has traditionally loved his veteran quarterbacks. And with that, you know, you think about Chad Henne and the work that he did in years past, stepping in to games when they really needed him and making a play here and there. You know, you think about Cleveland in the playoffs a few years ago. You're running their sprint pass there to Tyreek to get the first down to secure a win. The last year in the playoffs with the Jaguars, when Mahomes goes down with the ankle sprain, leads them on a 98-yard touchdown drive. Having the veteran is something that Andy Reid and the Chiefs have coveted over the past few years. But with Buechele, he's obviously a young talent, and if he gets released somebody is going to pick him up, whether it be for a practice squad, whether they give him a shot as the second guy on the roster, whatever it is, he will get a shot. I'm very interested to see how this all plays out, because the one thing you got to remember when it comes to roster building is they're not only competing against the people at their position, you're also competing against the other 53 guys on the roster, because at the end of the day, there's probably 45 or so, 50, maybe even on this roster, because the Chiefs are pretty deep, locks to make the roster. So you're really coming down to some battles at the end of the roster where you're going to be, Shane Buechele is going to be battling it out against a Richie James, a Justin Watson, a 9th or 10th D lineman, something like that at the bottom of the roster. And where do you make those decisions to say, hey, who is staying, who's got to get cut? These are the questions that they're going to be dealing with this entire offseason. Now, maybe it's something where because quarterback is so coveted in this league, he goes out, he does an incredible job all preseason. Teams see that. Maybe somebody's willing to throw, maybe a conditional 7th or something, a late round pick at him. Maybe the Cardinals are still interested. They got a new regime over there, so probably not. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. So the quarterback position, obviously, Patrick Mahomes is your one. No brainer there. Nothing to say there. But that battle between 2 and 3 is definitely something to watch, and it is definitely something that is going to affect the bottom of the 53-man roster. And then kind of an important note when I was just talking about that battle is there's only 3 preseason games, and now the deal is they get to keep the 90-man roster up until the last cut, where it used to be a couple waves of cuts. They're going to keep the 93 or 90, and then they're going to cut right down to 53. Okay. So it's not going to be where you're going to get a 90 down to like 72 or whatever it was before. It's going to be 90 right down to 43. So there's going to be a mass exodus of players that are going to be hitting free agency. Which could create a little chaos, and you're going to see the teams that are better prepared are going to be the ones that can handle it and are going to be able to pick up some veterans that might end up getting cut or released at that situation. Okay, moving on. Fullback, not one on the roster. I wanted to touch on that really quick. It's just been super interesting to kind of watch, because in an Andy Reid offense, we've seen over the years, Anthony Sherman, Michael Burton just recently, these guys have had major roles. They've been core special team guys where they've had, they've been on all 4 specs, and they've been on the roster. Now, do they do much? No. They're going to get their 12 carries a game and hopefully get first downs and play every special team. So it's interesting to note that they have not put one of those on the roster. And again, looking at how the roster is composed, if they don't add a fullback, now they have an extra spot on the roster to potentially keep a Shane Buechele or somebody like that. So that's just an interesting thing to keep an eye on, whether they end up adding one to the roster or not. Let's talk running back now for a minute. All offseason and all pre-draft process, if you were paying attention, it was kind of thought that the Chiefs were going to either draft a running back or they were going to bring a running back in. Now, eventually, they ended up signing Jerick McKinnon after the draft, and I think that the whole time he was going to be coming back. They just didn't want to sign the pre-draft process because it would have worked against their compensatory picks, and they would have lost some, and they didn't want to lose any compensatory picks. But I think they knew what the value that they have in McKinnon. The interesting thing is really Clyde Edwards-Helaire. What do they do with him? Now, they turned down his 5th-year option. Okay. So I think that right there is the starting point of kind of tells you where they're going with regards to him and kind of what they think about him and how they feel about him. He doesn't seem to be part of the long-term plan unless they're thinking, release him and then maybe bring him back for a cheaper cost or something. But I don't know. He seems to have definitely fallen on ill will in the Chiefs community. He wasn't at the Super Bowl parade because he was at a fashion show, which I thought was an interesting choice. There's been speculation, nothing really hardcore or really permanent from any insiders throughout the NFL about a potential trade, but people have been speculating that. Whether that happens, we'll have to see. But you know what you have in Pacheco, you know what you have in McKinnon. Those guys are going to be your 1-2 guys. McKinnon's still going to get all your third down work. They trust him in pass pro. They trust him out in the routes. He's a guy who had a ton of touchdowns last year, double-digit touchdowns, super productive, especially even at his age. He's over 30 years old. So he's obviously up there in age, and he's not going to be in the long-term plans. But those two are going to be your guy for the 2023 season. There's no question about it. Now, they brought in an undrafted free agent in Deneric Prince out of Tulsa, who is a big physical type runner. I think of him, and I tweeted this out, his relative athletic score. So if you're on Twitter or if you've been following that, it's called the RAS score. And it takes into account a bunch of different things, height, weight, 40, bench, arm length, 4 shuttles, 10-yard split, 20-yard split, all that stuff, broad jump, all that to get one composite score. And it's almost identical to Gus Edwards out of the Baltimore Ravens. Okay. Big guy, 5'11", over 220 pounds, physical downhill runner. He is somebody that is not going to be going side to side. He's not going to run your outside zones. And if he does, you're hoping he gets one cut and he can get north and south. Not a ton of lateral quickness, wasn't asked to do much in the passing game. So he is a guy that is kind of an outside chance to make the roster, but he is a physical downhill punishing runner. And that is something that they don't have on the roster. And again, now if they're not going to bring in a fullback, that is a spot. Maybe they keep 4 running backs active. They'll have Pacheco and McKinnon and Clyde and Prince. Again, very interesting, the bottom of the roster. Can he compete on special teams? That's always huge, right? You know how Dave Tube is going to get his say. He's going to get his special teams guys. So can you contribute on special teams? If you can, you got a shot to make this roster, especially those younger guys at the bottom of the roster. But again, you're not only competing against the other running backs, you're competing against the 4th or 5th safety, the Shamari Connor who they just drafted. We'll get to him in the next show, but those are the guys you're competing with to make the roster spot. I think at running back, they're pretty set. Would I be surprised if they brought somebody in at this point? Yes. Would I be surprised if they tried to move Clyde? Yes, because I just don't know if there's any want from the rest of the league out there, right? You can want to trade him all you want, but you also have to have somebody else want him back. So that's the hardest thing about trade. You got to find two parties that are both in line to what they want to do. So I would say the running back room is pretty much set. Whether they keep 3 guys on the active game day roster, 4 is yet to be seen. Prince seems like a prime candidate for practice squad. And then, if something happened where they got banged up, we know Clyde's battled injuries his entire career, then, maybe he's a guy that could eventually step in and be that third back special teams type player for them. Next, we have the tight end position. So, again, it seems like a pretty straightforward position. You got Travis Kelce, who is, again, you could argue he's the best tight end in NFL history. Just continues to somehow get better and better every year as he ages. They're definitely going to need to and want to pace him for the year because he is getting up there in age. He's 33, 34 years old, and You don't want him being in line and taking shots and having to cut defensive ends and block defensive ends and take hits from linebackers and safeties. But the nice thing is they do have a pretty good stable of younger guys in there. First Noah Gray, who seems to be the next guy in line, who gets all the sub packages, the 12 personnel stuff. He is always the next guy in. And something that is interesting to note, that I've been playing around with, is he did play a little bit of H-back, fullback type at Duke. So maybe their thought is, hey, we don't run enough fullback sets to warrant a roster spot. We have a guy who has done it in the past. Let's not take up the roster spot and just use him. We'll put him there if we have to put him, put anybody there, which makes a lot of sense to me. And then on top of that, they got everybody's favorite Jody Fortson, who's battled some injuries, but super athletic tight end who gets a ton of kind of red zone targets when they get down there. Big dude, athletic guy. And then after him, they have Blake Bell, who everybody knows is a good blocker. That would be pretty much his primary role in this set. But the Chiefs use so many tight ends. They use 12 personnel. They use 13 personnel. It's a staple of their offense. They love to do it. So they're going to continue to roll these four guys out on game days. And somebody who I was thinking about the other day at the tight end position for Kansas City is Matt Bushman. And he was somebody who last year had an awesome preseason. If everybody remembers, he had that long touchdown, was playing really well, and he ended up getting hurt. He's older in age, but younger in experience in the NFL. So it'd be interesting to kind of see where he goes too, because he was having a very nice preseason last year before he got injured for the year. And then on top of that, they have Kendall Blanton, who is a local Kansas City guy who they've signed a few times and released and brought him back. So both of those guys, potential practice squad guys that could kind of keep around. Blanton's been, he was with the Rams. He's been on some active rosters. He's been some game day rosters where he's played. So they have a good experience in the tight end room, and that's good for what this offense does and what the way they want to operate with 12 and 13 personnel. It just fits this Andy Reid scheme, Matt Nagy scheme perfectly. We're going to take a quick break, and when we are back, we are going to finish the state of the Kansas City Chiefs offense with the wide receivers and everybody's favorite, the offensive line.
What up, KC? After yet another Kansas City Chiefs Super Bowl victory, we have an awesome opportunity for you to broadcast your business or your services to a very enthusiastic Kansas City audience. We've started Kansas City Sports Company, which is a sports media broadcasting hub that brings you multiple different live shows covering all the local Kansas City sports teams. We're offering 30-second ad spots, 60-second ad spots, event sponsorships, show sponsorships, studio sponsorships, and much, much more. If you want more information or if this sounds like an opportunity for you, either contact me or hit that contact us link on the website.
All right, everybody, we are back again. My name is Justin Dupengeiser. This is the Arrowhead Action Podcast. You are on the Kansas City Sports Company website and YouTube page. Make sure you're smashing the like button. Make sure you're subscribing to the channel. It goes a long way to help everybody finding us. Make sure you're doing all that good fun stuff. Again, follow me on Twitter at JDiz1617, JDIZ1617 for all the takes that you probably don't care about. Well, hopefully you do. Stick around. I got some good ones. And speaking of that, we're going to go to wide receiver, which has probably been one of the most debated offseason topics for the Kansas City Chiefs and Chiefs Kingdom this entire offseason and draft process. The Chiefs come into this coming year, with Marquez Valdez-Scantling, Kadarius Toney, Sky Moore. Let's start there, okay? Those are the three guys who I think are going to be your starters on day one. when the Chiefs open up the year against the Detroit Lions, when we're all going to be going crazy and watching them get their rings and drop the banners and all that fun stuff, and hopefully get a big win against the up and coming Detroit Lions. Okay, now they drafted Sky Moore a few years ago. He was the second round pick on him. They traded 2 draft picks to get Kadarius Toney, and they signed MVS in the offseason. I don't think MVS is going to be on this roster after this year. I thought there was a chance that he wasn't going to be on the roster this season. He is somebody, though, that showed up in the postseason, and Mahomes clearly trusted him to make some plays. You think about the Bengals games with some big catches, the Jags games, he had some big catches. So he's going to be out there. He's trusted. Andy Reid trusts him. Mahomes trusts him. What we want to see and what we need to see in this offense, at least I do, is I need to see Kadarius Toney, 1, stay healthy. And then 2, I need to see Kadarius Toney and Sky Moore take the next step to be guys in this offense who can contribute on a regular basis, that can beat press man coverage, that can get open and find the soft spots and zones. And I think if they can take those next steps, they're 2 very good athletes with the ball in their hands, right? We saw what Kadarius Toney did in the Super Bowl with that punt return, right? We saw what he did when he was at Florida. There was a reason that he was the first round pick for the Giants, right? He is an athlete. He's incredible with the ball in his hands. Sky Moore, I think people have really kind of given up on him, and I don't think that that's a wise decision. I think that Sky is going to be very good for the Chiefs. I think he has a tremendous release package. I think that he is physical at the point of the catch. He can run after the catch, and you kind of saw flashes of that. And I was hoping, think about last year when they played the Chargers, and all these receivers are getting hurt, and then Sky Moore kind of steps up and has his biggest game of the year. And I thought to myself, okay, here we go. This is going to be the launching point for his season. He's going to be the guy. And it just kind of never took off. Obviously Sky and Toney, they both ended up scoring in the Super Bowl, which was awesome. What a time for Sky Moore to get his first touchdown with the Chiefs in the Super Bowl. Huge moment for him. I thought that was great. But those are 2 guys and they've kind of talked in the offseason, both Brett Veach and Andy Reid, about how they're going to have expanded roles. Okay. So we're going to find out. We're going to find out where they really stand pretty early, I think. And I think it's going to be those 3 as your starters on day 1. Next guy I want to talk about is Rashee Rice. So he is their draft pick this year in the 2nd round. SMU product. Full disclosure, he was like the last wide receiver I wanted the Kansas City Chiefs to take. I thought his film wasn't great. For a guy that it was so explosive at the combine, it just didn't seem to translate to the field as much as I would have hoped. Now, did come out. He played the entire year pretty much on a broken toe. He had turf toe, whatever it was. So he was playing injured throughout the entire year. And apparently his teammates love him, and he's a warrior, and he's out there, and the coaches love him. And there is something to say about that. He is going to have some work, I think, to get on the field like any wide receiver does, any rookie wide receiver does in an Andy Reid offense. You think about how limited the snaps were for Sky Moore at the beginning. I would expect Rashee Rice to kind of see the same thing. I don't think that he's going to go out there and he's going to play 30 snaps in his first game. I just don't see that. Now, what does Rice do better than anybody that they have on the roster? Well, he's a really good contested catch guy. He's, big physical receiver. And they don't really have that as far as, you think about Kadarius Toney, you think about Sky Moore. Those guys aren't those big contested catch guys. Those are, the smaller, quicker great separation type receivers. Even at Valdez Scantling, who is a little bit taller, he's not a huge contested catch guy. He's not very physical at the point of attack. He's a long strider, run by you kind of guy. I thought it was interesting that Brett Veach compared him to Juju, saying he's almost a 1-to-1 comparison, which I don't know if I really see that, but I mean, Rice does do a nice job of yards after catch. That is what his mantra was coming out of FSMU. He's an absolute yak monster. And in this Chiefs offense, that's kind of what they've turned to, right? They're getting the ball out of Mahomes' hand and he's finding the open guys, and these guys are running after the catch. So if that's what your offense is, well, you just got the best player at receiver probably in the draft to do that. So maybe that's what their thought process was. He's going to be a guy that's going to contribute eventually. How much that happens at the beginning, I don't know. I was not super high on him. I did not like his film that much. Again, played through injury. So here's hoping that he can turn it on and can be somebody that can contribute to this offense, because he is different than what they have in the other compared to the other wide receivers. Next, you have Justin Watson. So Justin Watson, they brought back. He was a free agent, and he just sat and nobody signed him. And eventually got to the point where you just knew what was coming. They were going to bring him back, and he's your wind sprint guy. He goes out there and he just runs wind sprints. So sorry, I thought we had some technical difficulties there. He's not going to be a guy that is going to contribute anything huge on offense, but he's big, he's physical, he's fast. He's a special teams guy. He's been a gunner. He can be on kickoff. He can be on kick return. He can be on punt return. So he's your four core special team guy. And they trust him to be out there and run all the routes, even if he's getting absolutely no targets. So I think he makes the roster. They gave him a contract, a 2-year contract, which I thought was a little crazy, but he's somebody who will be on the roster. I do think. Another free agent that they ended up signing this offseason is Richie James. So Richie James comes over. He spent time with the Niners, spent time with the Giants. He's your smaller slot type guy, not super fast, pretty quick, good punt returner, which is something the Chiefs need to address. So that could be a huge leg up for him on making the roster. Hopefully he is somebody that can find a niche for himself on this roster. I do think that he has an outside shot of being the 6th wide receiver. Again, he's going to have to find it on special teams, and it's going to have to probably be as a punt returner. Other than that, I just don't know, because they already have 2 guys who, and if you're listening to Brett Veach, 3 guys in Sky Moore, Kadarius Toney, and now Rashee Rice, who can play in the slot. And that's pretty much what Richie James is. He's a slot-only guy. So where does he fit? It's going to be tough for him. He's going to have to really provide the value as a punt returner to be able to do that. And then the last guy, I'll talk about 2 more guys. And that's the darling of the offseason, and that is Mr. Justin Ross. Everybody sees the videos, the workouts, they're hoping. Would it be a great story? You bet it would be. I'm pulling for the guy. If you remember him when they played Alabama in the national championship and he was a freshman, he was arguably the best player on the field, and that's Clemson, Alabama. 2 tremendous programs throwing guys into the NFL left and right every single year, and he was dominant. He was amazing. He's battled a ton of injuries. we'll see. Hopefully. And then the other guy is Jarian Ely, who they've cut and released and brought back to the practice squad. And according to multiple people that were at the recent minicamp, he looked like one of the best players there. Where does he fit in? Again, another small slot type guy, played running back some. Interesting that he could be a multiple weapon guy with his running back, wide receiver skill set, playing both positions. So that 6th receiver spot, the Richie James, Justin Ross, Jarian Ely, Emar Smith Martis, I'm sure I just murdered his name, and I apologize to him for that. But, where do these guys fit in? Where do they battle? I give the leg up probably to Richie James, but Justin Ross, Jarian Ely, those are two names I would definitely keep an eye on and definitely going to want to see what happens in this offseason in camp and kind of how that all plays out. All right, let's talk about offensive line, because behind wide receiver, and maybe even more than wide receiver at this point, offensive line has been a hot topic in Chiefs Kingdom this offseason. Joe Thuney, Creed Humphrey, Trey Smith. Your interior of line is one of the best in the NFL. Solid, no worries. All right, let's move on to the next. Where it gets interesting is the tackle positions. So obviously this offseason, they had Orlando Brown move on. They couldn't get a deal done with him. I give the Chiefs organization, Brett Veach, a ton of credit. They didn't overpay for a guy who wanted a ton of money, who, in my opinion, he was okay. He was an okay left tackle. He wasn't a top 5 guy. He wasn't a top 10 guy. He's in your, teens range of offensive tackles in the NFL. He was okay. Struggled with speed, gigantic guy, good run blocker, pass blocking, speed rushers, an issue. The Chiefs throw the ball a lot. 15 is the face of the franchise. You got to protect him. I was okay with moving on from him. So in the offseason, what do? Well, they sign Jawan Taylor from the Jaguars, who is a right tackle, and they say, well, he's going to play left tackle now. We're moving him to left. Okay, that's fine. Well, if you move him to left, you no longer have Andrew Wiley on the right, because he is also gone. He was a free agent. He signed with the Commanders. So now you have to replace right tackle. Well, going into the draft, it was, we feel good about our guys, Lucas Nyang. These guys are going to compete. Whatever happens there, happens there. Well, they go out and they draft a guy who plays right tackle pretty much his entire collegiate career in Wanya Morris. And now that kind of tells you what they feel about the right tackles currently on the roster. And then on top of that, they get done with the draft and they sign veteran Donovan Smith, who is a left tackle. Okay, so now what is the plan at left? Or now what is the plan at tackle? And that's what everybody was debating. Well, Andy Reid came out in a press conference and said Donovan Smith is going to get the first shot at left tackle. Jawan Taylor is going to get the first shot at right tackle. Okay, so the all offseason, they signed Jawan Taylor to play left tackle. Now all of a sudden he's back at right. We signed Donovan Smith. He's going to left. Donovan Smith, very, very small contract, making a little bit over $1 million and change. Not super smart, super starter money by any means. And I think it was a good move. I don't think you can have enough veteran offensive linemen who've played in high leverage situations. He's played in Super Bowls. He protected Tom Brady. He's played for some good offensive lines. Has he been great in his career? No, he has not. Personally, in my opinion, I think Jawan Taylor ends up moving to left. And I think Wanya Morris takes the right tackle spot, and that's where they end up at the end of the year. I don't think that Donovan Smith has enough left to lock down the left side for the foreseeable future. And the other issue I see with that is okay, so after this year, when Donovan Smith is only on a 1-year contract, are you starting over again at left tackle? Or are you going to move Jawan Taylor to the left and let him win the job and take that over and be your left tackle for the future? Wanya Morris can be your right tackle for the future. Those guys can play tackle for you for the next 4 or 5 years. That makes more sense to me. And I think if they do that, I think they could be good. Now, is moving offensive tackle sides difficult? Yeah. Orlando Brown did it. He moved from right to left and they did okay. Andy Heck is one of the best offensive line coaches in the NFL. Andy Reid, these guys know what they're doing. So if anybody can do it and teach it, I think it's those guys, and especially with Taylor, who's a terrific athlete, I think he'll be okay at left tackle. If they don't do that and Donovan Smith does win it, I mean, that's fine too, really, as long as Smith is okay. He can't be, the guy that's giving up 35 pressures a season, which he's pretty prone to do. Okay. It'll be one of my favorite battles to watch this entire camp season, this entire off season. As far as backups go, you got Nick Allegretti, who can play on the inside, either guards. He does have some center experience. Great guy to have that can play all along the interior. You have Austin Ryder, who's familiar. He's a guy that might be a guy that they keep around, put him on the practice squad, but is there to play center in case, worst case scenario type stuff. Darian Kennard is an interesting one because he was another one that they talked about with Lucas Nyang as potentially being a guy who could play right tackle for him. They also said that he'll move inside. So I think, he's somebody that potentially could replace Joe Thuney, which is going to happen sooner than later, unfortunately. Thuney's been amazing with his time in Kansas City. I mean, as a pro, he's been one of the best guards, probably one of the most underrated players in the NFL. He's just so consistent. I mean, he's so massive. And that's the other reason I think that Taylor can play the left. You're putting him by one of the best pass blocking guards in the NFL, and that's going to give him a ton of help. It is also potentially why Donovan Smith could do it. Donovan Smith's best year was with Ali Marpet with the Bucs when Marpet was making all pro teams. So maybe if he has that help, he'll be okay. But I think their interior is so strong, they have a chance to have a really good offensive line either way, whether it be Wanya, Donovan, or Taylor, and whatever combination that is. And then they have solid backup guys, like I mentioned, Allegretti, Kennard. Those are guys that are solid to be in the inside. Kennard's obviously got a long ways to go, but they kind of gave him almost a redshirt year last year to get used to things. And then Nyang, as long as he's healthy, he's an okay backup, right? Is he a starter? He hasn't really shown that he was starting before he got hurt. Who knows, if he's ever going to be the same post that injury. And that's the state of the offense, guys. I think that they're in a great spot. The one thing that I don't think you can ever rule out, especially with Brett Veach, is adding to the roster, whatever position it is. He is constantly going to look to turn over and put the best guys on this team. There was the rumors of the DeAndre Hopkins trade stuff. Will he get released? Will he get? I don't think so at this point. He's due to make $19.5 million. There's no reason for him to want to give up that money, and there's no way that the Chiefs are going to do that with the Chris Jones contract looming. So I think you could see maybe some lower end guys, like I said, maybe Clyde gets moved, something like that, or if there's a surprise cut, maybe again at tackle or something. But other than that, I'm not sure that you're going to see anybody else. But Veach, you never know, man. He's going to find a way. Right? They didn't make that Kadarius Toney until midseason, and he was somebody that was on their radar for a long time per Veach. So they're in a really good spot. Obviously, Mahomes is the eraser, man. He makes everything that is not good, he makes it okay. So they'll have a solid offensive line again. You need some receivers to step up, but as far as the state of their offense goes, they're in okay shape. And Matt Nagy's the OC this year. Wish nothing but the best for Bieniemy over in Washington. But I think that Mahomes and Nagy have a real good relationship, and I'm excited to see where they go with that. Once again, guys and gals, I am Justin Dugan-Geyser. This has been a Arrowhead Action. Super pumped to have you here. We're going to be covering all things Chiefs. We'll throw in some betting. We'll throw in some DFS, some fantasy sports. Make sure you're checking it all out. Find me on Twitter at JDiz1617. Make sure you're smashing the like, you're subscribing to the channel, you're following everything that we got going on over at the Kansas City Sports Company, because we got a lot of stuff going on. It's going to be great. I appreciate everybody being here. I'll see you next time.